Welcome to this exploration of sacred science. Sacred geometry is an interesting topic that has come up a lot in recent discussions. This obviously sits in a wider framework of science generally, and it's useful to explore this. There are many ways of looking at it, and we can have a variety of different perspectives, depending on where we're coming from. We're going to cover a lot of topics as quickly as possible to keep within time limits. Many of the topics could benefit from deeper discussion. I particularly wish to acknowledge the valuable contributions of Galactic science and to thank Yeshe Ashiana, Asen Michael Dean and Marianne Calloway and all of their supporting team for all of their dedicated work. Also to thank all who have contributed to preserve knowledge down the ages and to make it available to us in these times. Now I'll tuck myself away in a corner of the screen so that we can get on with the main business. What is sacred science? Science is associated with knowledge. Skio is to know. Sacred means holy, returning to wholeness, embracing the totality and more particularly the essence of life. Science is a pursuit and application of knowledge. Conventionally, science focuses on the natural and social world in physical 3D. It tests and validates knowledge by objective observation, in other words, is grounded in realism. The basic question asked is, does it work? It builds understanding through reasoning. This provides a framework for application with technologies, engineering, and so on. Science has provided substantial benefits. It has eased the burden of human life in 3D with technologies to relieve drudgery. For example, the extensive availability to energy by way of electricity. Transport has opened up a greater exploration of the world and so on. We have opportunities for a wider experience in life. Significantly also, it has democratized information, helping to free people from control, superstition and so on. In other words, it has been empowering. Most new information and discoveries are published and made relatively freely available in textbooks and courses. However, it also has significant limitations. It tends to focus on closed systems. It also focuses on what is tangible in 3D. This systematically excludes more subtle influences which can tend to be regarded as woo-woo. There are limits to closed systems. There are limits to how much we can know in purely physical systems and in purely physical terms. These are enshrined, for example, in the principle of uncertainty in physics. Also, at the very fine quantum levels of matter, we're dealing with probabilities and not rather than certainties. Also, more generally, the Austrian mathematician Kurt Gödel proved that no logical system in these terms can be entirely self-consistent. There will always be something that can neither be proven nor disproven within such a system. In other words, these closed systems cannot be complete in themselves. They point to other possibilities. Now, also, we cannot cope easily with such fundamentally important things as life, consciousness, creativity, and so on. These are subtle, but all important. Life is more about life than it is about matter, structures, physical laws, and so on. Science isn't good at providing meaning, purpose, values, and science has been extraordinarily successful in exploring and mastering 3D realities, but it appears to have reached the limits of its present framework. It's struggling to make sense of what it is finding on the edges of its territory, particularly at the very fine levels of quantum physics. It's also struggling to cope with practical problems such as the impacts of technology, finite resources, artificial intelligence, and so on. Instead of continuing to expand horizontally, it needs to open up to moving vertically into larger realities of higher and more subtle influences. The more subtle realities of life are more readily explored by going within, by expanding consciousness and integrating higher levels of our own nature. This has traditionally been the path of spiritual exploration. It has been cultivated in spiritual traditions and some religions, more particularly the older and deeper traditions of such as India and China, such as the Vedic or the Taoist wisdom traditions or even Buddhism. Knowledge of higher realities tends to come by way of revelation rather than discovery. It is generally presented as revealed knowledge, a gift from on high, and is presented in sacred books or records. However, the pathways of revelation pass through people, and this presents a number of problems. Knowledge passing through a person is inevitably coloured by the capacity and orientation of the person. How do we separate what is universal knowledge from what is personal influence? Subjective knowledge tends to become the preserve of those with the faculties to access it, and this confers power. Power carries responsibility. Where personal issues intrude or responsibilities aren't carried, this degrades the faculties. Then there can be a retreat into asserting authority to preserve power. Where there is natural authority, there is no need to assert it. Now, this assertion of authority can lead to elites, priestly castes claiming to represent God. Claiming infallibility, for example, is a great way to counter challenges and to avoid difficult questions. Excessive subjectivity can lead to detachment from reality. This in turn can lead to irrelevance. So there are problems with both excessive subjectivity and objectivity. The best way forward is likely to strike a balance between these extremes. We can open to higher realities and what they reveal to us in exploring our inner nature. We can ground knowledge in the reality of our lives and adapt and validate it by checking it out in the real world. It is good to test knowledge generally and empower ourselves by building our own trusted knowledge base. We are responsible for our own learning, for integrating the knowledge we accumulate, and for the empowerment it provides. Such knowledge is a stepping stone on the road to knowing. Now, a tree is a good symbol for life. By grounding in the earth and growing strong roots, we can reach high into the heavens and draw nourishment to sustain and support life. Now, in addition to the science we have accumulated in our present civilization in these times, we also have ancient science, ancient knowledge coming down to us from our ancestry in former times. And we can regard this as ancient science. In many locations around the world, we have a lot of very ancient megalithic monuments which point to a knowledge and an order and in former civilizations going back into the distant past. Here in Ireland in particular, we have a lot of very old stone monuments, megalithic monuments. Lithic means stone, and large megalithic monuments all over the countryside, and they're intriguing, they're very impressive, and they point to a lot of knowledge in former times, some of which we may have lost contact with in these current times. Now, all over the world, we have these megalithic sites. We have some, they're widespread in Peru, in South America, in Peru, for example. We have here the example of Sacsayhuaman. It's a huge megalithic structure outside Cusco in the mountains, in the Andes Mountains in Peru. The megalithic structures themselves, megalithic walls, are extremely impressive, but even within the walls, within the structure, we have internal structure within the in these sites, pointing to a knowledge of geometry, and that is quite intriguing. Now, these sites are all over the world. We have another example here of an ancient megalithic temple complex in Malta. Malta has, in the middle of the Mediterranean, has a huge collection of very old, very ancient megalithic sites. This is Manasra megalithic temple complex. It's on a beautiful coast location looking out over the Mediterranean Sea, and has very impressive internal structure pointing to a knowledge of geometry. We also have the very familiar sites such as Stonehenge in the UK, huge number of megalithic monuments throughout the UK, throughout northern France. Also quite a lot of megalithic monuments throughout Asia, Southeast Asia. So they're all over the world. Now, what is very interesting about a lot of these sites is that they're very well placed in their local environment. This indicates a knowledge of subtle alignments. Stonehenge is a very famous site, and a lot of research has been done on it. And there's been some wonderful research done by an English engineer, Paul Burley, who has examined the alignments around Stonehenge in very great detail. Now, in addition to this famous stone circle that we all know and that we all see in the photographs and so on, there are also a lot of additional structures around the site. In other words, the site is quite large. It extends all around the neighbouring countryside, and there's a lot of other outlier sites around the stone circle itself, and there is order and structure in these. And what emerges from close examination of some of these sites is that they're actually very well aligned within their local environment. In other words, they're very well placed, they're strategically placed, and they're very harmonized. Their alignment is very harmonized within their local environment. In addition to that, there is also evidence of alignment between some of these famous sites, some of these megalithic sites, in distant locations around the world. For example, there is a very famous energetic line linking the stone monuments, the famous megalithic monuments in southern UK. There's a line called the Michael Mary line that runs through the lines with all of the monuments, or with all the key monuments in southern England. And this actually extends all the way to an alignment with a very ancient stone monument, or megalithic monument, at Tiahuanaco in Bolivia, in South America. So people who have researched the alignment of these monuments are able to identify alignments that span the globe. In other words, there's a level of order and structure in where these monuments are sited and how they are aligned around the globe. That it would be very difficult to align these monuments, we'll say physically, to physically align the monuments so that they would line up in locations around the globe. But what it does suggest is that they weren't just aligning the monuments one with another, but they were actually aligning the monuments with an energy grid system within the Earth, with a subtle energy grid system within the Earth. And that the order and structure between the monuments resides not so much in the monuments themselves as in the energy grids that they were aligning with. These subtle energy lines are also known as ley lines. Dowsing skills were more prevalent in the past, so people would have had a means of sensing them and interacting with them. So it isn't unreasonable to understand that there would have been a significant degree of working with these energy grid lines, and that monuments and structures, megalithic structures, would have been aligned with them. Now, if we look at this plan view of the Menagerie Temple complex, we also see that it holds astronomical alignments. The orange lines there indicate the pathway of the sun entering into the chambers within the megalithic structure. So we have alignments for the equinoxes along the center, the primary axis of this particular element of the structure, where the sun would align along this line, along this axis of the structure. And then for the solstices, that's the winter solstice and that's the summer solstice, they all form alignments within the chamber. So the key astronomical alignments with the sun are actually mapped within the internal structure of this particular complex. Now that takes us into another element of structure within some of these ancient monuments. In addition to geometric alignment with the Earth, we also have geometric alignment with the sky alignments with celestial bodies. Now these celestial bodies, the stars and the planets moving through our sky, they mark out time cycles, and they provide indicators for energetic alignments with influences that can be coming to us from the sky, in other words, with higher dimensional influences. Now, we have a local site here called Newgrange here in Ireland, which is not far from Dublin, and this has a very significant alignment. The front of the monument is indicated here. Now, there's a chamber within the monument, deep within the monument, and there's a passageway into that chamber. And there's an alignment through a skybox coming in through along the roof of the monument. And this marks an alignment with the sunrise at the winter solstice. In other words, on the 21st of December, the sun rising, as the sun rises, it will shine a beam right in through this entrance point, down a long chamber into a larger chamber within the monument, and it will strike a bowl, a stone basin within the core of the monument. And it only lasts for a few minutes, and it is specific to the time of year, to the 21st of December, plus or minus a day or two. So it does form a significant astronomical alignment with the rising sun. Now, the significance of this alignment can be summarized as follows. We have the sunrise itself represents the start of the day, so it's a new day, it's signaling a new day. The winter solstice signifies the ending of one year and the starting of another year, particularly in the northern hemisphere. Now, this brings us to the third and more significant alignment. This is the alignment between our sun and the galactic core, our own galactic core, which also coincides with the winter solstice on the 21st of December. And this is illustrated in this diagram in the lower right corner. So this green line reflects the pathway of the sun through our sky. It is the pathway of our planet as it orbits the sun. But relative to our Earth, it is also the pathway that our sun follows through the sky. And all of our planets sit pretty much on the same solar plane, orbiting our sun. So they also travel pretty close to this ecliptic plane, this ecliptic pathway through the sky. So it reflects the motion of the sun through our sky. Now, we also have our galaxy. Our solar system exists within a galaxy, and this surrounds us as a whitish band of stars in our sky at an angle to the solar plane, to the ecliptic plane. It's quite visible in the sky at night. Now, our sun moves across the center of that Milky Way galaxy, as the sun does a complete revolution around us through the night sky over the course of a year. Now, there's a particular point in the year where the sun actually passes through the Milky Way galaxy and passes close to the galactic core of our galaxy. This is referred to as Sagittarius A star, and it's shown down here. It passes just above core of the galaxy at the winter solstice. Now, this is quite significant at this time of the year, and it's particularly significant in these times. The Earth has another orientation with the sun that impacts on all of this. The axis of the Earth is tilted at an angle relative to the solar plane and relative to the sun. The angle is 23.4 degrees. So this means that over the course of a year, the Earth is alternately tilting towards the sun and away from the sun. So during the summer in the northern hemisphere, the northern portion of the planet is tilting towards the sun, and at the summer solstice, it has its maximum tilt towards the sun, so the sun appears high in the sky in the northern hemisphere, and conversely, it's low in the sky in the southern hemisphere. And that situation is changed, reversed 6 months later, where the sun is low in the northern sky and high in the southern sky. And then in between, during the equinoxes, the spring and the summer equinoxes, the sun is over the equator, so it's equally present to both the northern and the southern hemispheres. Now, this inclination of the Earth's axis, it creates what we experience as our seasonal cycle over the course of a year. It gives us our seasons: summer, when the sun is high in the sky in the northern hemisphere, and winter, when it's low in the sky, and spring and autumn in between. Now, this particular tilt of the Earth is precessing, or it's shifting slowly over a long period of time. The cycle is about 26,000 years long, 25,800 years long. That means that the tilt of the Earth relative to the sun and to fixed space is shifting by about 1 degree every 72 years. So that causes our seasonal pattern to shift relative to the fixed stars on a cycle of about 26,000 years. That means that our winter solstice, which arises for us on the 21st of December, is actually moving backwards through the sky at a rate of 1 degree for every 72 years. So even though the sun coincides with the center of the galaxy on our 21st of December, our 21st of December is actually shifting at a very slow rate along this ecliptic plane. So it's moving backwards along it. So we're in a very special time where our winter solstice actually coincides with the center of the galaxy. So that's quite unusual. It only arises once every 26,000 years. Now, when it does arise, it's a fairly slow pattern, so it is present for about, within 1 degree, it's present for about 72 years. So it's not some a very short-term alignment. This is a very slow cycle. So we're in a very special time then, where the winter solstice coincides with the sun passing the center of the galaxy. Now, the sun passes the center of the galaxy once every year. It does a complete circuit once every year. It passes the center of the galaxy once every year. And it just happens that passing the center of the galaxy now coincides with our winter solstice. Now, our winter solstice marks the beginning and the ending of a year. So this is symbolic. We have the great precessional cycle of 26,000 years, which is a great year in terms of earthly alignments. And we're at the ending of 1 year, beginning of another year within this great precessional cycle. So this is a very special time. And this is something that has been highlighted for example, in the Mayan calendar. They were aware that this alignment would arise at this particular time. Their calendars were highly oriented to astronomical alignments. And so they were quite aware of this, and they were able to pinpoint this particular point in time. There are indications also that this particular alignment has been mentioned or has been detailed on carvings on some of the older megalithic structures. So it is something that our ancestors were tuned into and were aware of, and it is something that they pointed to in the future. So it is a special time in that regard. So there are indications of a knowledge of both earthly and cosmic alignments in some of these ancient structures. In other words, there was a knowledge of the where, the when, and the how to interact with cosmic influences, with higher dimensional influences effectively. And there are indications this knowledge was actually used in ancient times to ground some of these higher dimensional energies and influences, ground them through these structures into crystal beds underneath these structures for storage within the earth. And this energy could then come available for distribution through the ley lines in the energy grids on the earth. So this is obviously an advanced level of spiritual knowledge and spiritual technology. There are indications, however, that knowledge was abused and that we have lost it. But there is the possibility for us to earn it back through practicing responsibility and attaining to a degree of spiritual maturity. Before moving on, it can be interesting to look at where we sit in our Milky Way galaxy. It's illustrated in this particular diagram. Our solar system sits in the center of this yellow circle. Our solar system sits out in the suburbs of our Milky Way galaxy in between two arms. It's not a very prominent position within the galaxy. Now this is amplified over here to illustrate that. This yellow ring illustrates all of the stars that are visible to the naked eye in our sky. In other words, these are all the stars that we can see with the naked eye. We can see great collections of stars, distant galaxies like the Andromeda galaxy, which have a large number of stars and which are very bright. We can see those with the naked eye. But in relation to individual stars, this is how far we can see. So our night sky just encompasses this portion of our Milky Way galaxy in the vicinity of our solar system. So it's quite small in relation to the totality of the galaxy. And even within this portion of the sky we can see with the naked eye, our solar system is just a speck within that. And even within the solar system, our Earth is a further speck within the solar system. Our location is quite tiny and insignificant in relation to the Milky Way galaxy as a whole. Now the galaxy itself is rotating, and all of the stars are moving with the galaxy. The galaxy is spinning in clockwise direction. The sun and the solar system move around the center of the galaxy on a 230 million year cycle, and this is called the galactic year. So that is additional motion for the whole of our solar system in relation to the fixed stars. Also, our solar system is actually bobbing up and down through the plane of the Milky Way galaxy. The Milky Way galaxy is largely flat, and our solar system is moving up and down, bobbing up and down through the plane of the Milky Way galaxy as it moves around the center of the Milky Way galaxy. So it moves up and down on a roughly 30 to 33 million year cycle. In other words, 30 to 33 million years above the solar plane and another 30 to 33 million years below the solar plane. So a 60 to 66 year combined cycle. And at the present time, it's very much on the upside. At the present time, at the time of winter solstice, our Earth and the Sun line up in almost direct alignment with the center of the Milky Way galaxy. So that creates a significant time marker for us here on Earth. Finally, the solar system is inclined at a 60-degree angle relative to the galactic plane, and this is why the Milky Way is at a corresponding angle in the sky, in our night sky.